I think the three most important keywords, if I want to choose to describe China's success, is the following. Number one is state capacity. And the second one is correct industrial policy. You simply having a state capacity does not automatically lead to the design and execution and implementation of correct industrial policy, which requires a very sophisticated bureaucracy and political system and leadership. And the third aspect is that the ability to innovate is not, what people normally describe as, taking place in the universities. So the third keyword I want to describe China's success is learning by doing. China has so far developed the largest possible quote-unquote university in the world to train engineers, to practice on industrial problems, and to innovate. So you look at Jack Ma, he's a very successful entrepreneur in China. But if you move Jack Ma to India, to Philippines, to Argentina, and why he's more successful in China? Because the Chinese government has created much better, market-friendly environment and a platform for Jack Ma to perform. So therefore, he becomes Jack Ma. There's a view that, Chinese economy has already peaked. I think that view is completely inconsistent with the history of industrialization. As I mentioned earlier, China is still in the process of finishing its industrial revolution or industrialization. If we further divide the process of industrialization into several stages, we can call the first stage, the textile light industrial revolution, and the railroad or steel-led heavy industrial revolution, and then the so-called IT technology-led third industrial revolution. Today, AI and new energy-led fourth industrial revolution. But, based on my research of economic history, any nation, if we want to become modernized, you cannot just directly jump into fourth industrial revolution. You still have to repeat the earlier waves of industrial revolution to be successful, because every earlier wave of industrial revolution create the market condition for the second or the next industrial revolution to take place, because that requires a market condition for all type of new technology to be profitable. Now China's entering the race of fourth industrial revolution on a par with the US. So even though China now is already entering this race of fourth industrial revolution, but China has not completely finished its earlier phases. For example, China still has a large agricultural sector which is not completely modernized, and leaving China with still about 30%, around 30% or even more population living in the rural area. So China still has a huge room to develop and to finish its industrialization process. And today, China's average per capita income is still at the average level of the globe, and it's not high income economy yet. But what gives me the confidence that China is able to fill that gap and completely finish the earlier phase of industrial revolution was based on the three observations. Number one, China has followed the right industrial sequence or industrial policy. The second most important aspect is state capacity, and China clearly still keeps that state capacity, and that's a very important critical element. And many developing countries now, we see they are not able to develop, and they fall into the so-called poverty trap or middle income trap is precisely the lack of state capacity, which is not the case in China. And the third most important element, which I view very importantly to support my argument to be optimistic about China, is that technology development mostly comes from learning by doing, not from universities, not from schools. Therefore, in a sense, the most important university is not on school campus, but it's in the manufacturing sector. And China has the world's largest manufacturing sector ever in human history that created the largest learning opportunity and the opportunity for creation, for innovation in China. China's university, of course, still look backward compared to U.S. universities. But, if you look at U.S. history, fundamental science was never an important issue for the government in the 19th century. In the 19th century, U.S. government never paid attention to fundamental research. They just applied the research, scientific research from Europe to their economy. They tried to become the number one manufacturing center. And it is only after U.S. become manufacturing center, their innovative capacity start to explode. In the earlier, they were just simply a follower or mimicking European technology. But once they moved into the frontier of manufacturing, and the U.S. was forced to become the leader, and the opportunity for innovation also become widely open. That's also the case in China. And that's the foundation for China to become one of the most innovative nation in science, even in basic science in the future. Lots of people say that China become the factory of the world, become the center of global manufacturing was because of WTO. I think that view is biased because China became the number one nation in terms of capacity and market for textiles by 1995. In other words, in 1995, 6 years before China joining WTO, China was already the world number one textile producer and exporter. Therefore, 6 years later, when China joined WTO, China was ready to exploit or utilize the global market. Whereas other developing countries such as India, they joined WTO earlier than China did, but there was very little effect. This most important reason was because those nations were not ready at all. Their government did not, or they failed to nurture the correct industry using correct industrial policy. But China started to nurture textile industry, started in economic reform by 1979. And so with almost 15 years of continuous government nurturing and facilitation and assistance, China's textile industry developed very rapidly. Earlier was led by SOEs, by state-owned textile factory. Later on, led by private enterprises. But even private enterprises also need government help for them to grow rapidly and in a healthy manner. So therefore, the very reason WTO served as an important juncture for China to become the center of manufacturing was not because of WTO per se, was rather because of China's government industrial policy to facilitate and to develop textile industry before that. Now China's industrial revolution is featuring automobiles and China's EV cars and China's solar panel, new energy in technology now is the leader of the world. The Chinese government started to nurture, facilitate a new energy technology back 10 or even 20 years ago. And so there has been a long history and preparation for China to develop and to innovate in this industry. Chinese government has provided lots of financial support to build lots of infrastructure, which is required for EV cars to function smoothly and to be commercializable and to be accessible and user-friendly by household. And without those industrial policy, for example, China's capacity to generate electricity is very important. Nowadays, if you travel to some other emerging economies such as Vietnam and India, you realize one thing which is very striking, that is the lack of the capacity to supply enough electricity. China electricity capacity or supply capacity now is number one in the world. It's producing twice as much electricity than the US. And that provided the foundation for the EV industry to emerge.
By the way, this video is just a glimpse. For the full story and deeper insights, click here and visit our website.
I think the three most important keywords if I want to choose to describe China's success